Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are back for Contender Series Week 5, and we're live to thrive with our boy Gordo Gambles. Excited to do it once again. We're talking about the Contender Series. We've been doing this for a couple years now, and what I want you guys to know right off the rip is we switch channels each and every week. So if you were saying to yourself last week, where were you guys? Plays and fades. Make sure you get subscribed. Make sure you show some love to our guy Gordo because he's here every week to break down these fights right alongside me. And this is an odd week, right? Week 5. So you know that we're back on my channel. My name is Liam. I pick fights each and every week here on this channel, and we're doing it live with our guy Gordo. So let's get started. Gordo, how you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing good. Look at that intro. That means me. I'm Gordo, and I gamble, my friend. No, let's do this. Let's talk some fights, man. Did my Contender Series. Happy to talk it with you as always. Last week was one on my channel, one where we had some good looks, and we did pretty good on the betting front. So I'm looking forward to doing it again. We were supposed to have 2 Canadians on this card, down to 1. Still some interesting scraps, and excited to hear your thoughts on them, man.
Hell yeah. Last week, if y'all, were listening closely, could pay attention a little bit between the lines on the breakdown that we did. I gave away Peterson might get that finish on the ground. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And on the official plays last week, plus 1,100, Thomas Peterson by sub, first of his career. Shout out to that guy going out there and getting the damn thing done. But now we've got 5 new fights to break down, my brother. So let's start with the first one like we always do. We got Dione Barbosa taking on Rainn Guerrero. And this, sometimes people talk about low-level WMMA. That's what I feel like we're getting in this kind of matchup. We're talking about 2 girls that both have, less than 15 combined professional fights here. Rainn Guerrero, from my Instagram stock, seems like she's got a boyfriend that's a fighter and an MMA coach. So she's been getting training in that way, with him personally for a long time, from what it seems. And then on top of that, she gets some work in with other girls. She's had some fights in the LFA, but it didn't seem to me like there was a ton of technical sophistication to what she's doing. She's throwing a spinning back fist every 30 seconds, like a recurring theme. But also she's bringing a lot of pressure, and she's exerting herself on these women. She's going forward. She's trying to throw a lot. She's trying to stay on them with takedowns and pressure. So I think she brings some, threats to the table in that regard. We've seen Barbosa, when she did take on somebody like Josiane Nunes, kind of break under that pressure. But that was in a fight she was dominating, right? Taking her down multiple times, getting on top, looking like she was having a lot of success in the grappling. And we know Josiane Nunes to have pretty rare power for WMMA. So I feel like Dione Barbosa, kind of has fought a better level of competition and looks like she has a path to victory going out there, getting takedowns, getting to the top position and using her Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She nearly finished that fight in the first round, got a little bit overzealous with some submission attempts, but had really good positions early on and looked like she was physically very strong. So I want to go back and see exactly what these women looked like at the face-off. I watched all that stuff earlier. Then I taped the fights. And so for me, I kind of want to go back and look at that now and kind of see if it gives me a better impression. But almost a lean to the Barbosa side for me. I haven't checked the odds here, Gordo, but I'm going to kick
Have
this
fun
over to
doing
you
that.
and excited to see how this one shakes out. So for you first, my brother, what do you think?
Yeah, low level indeed, but one where we do have ourselves a hefty favorite on one side. And as much as I want to go out there and play into some WMMA variants and take the underdog, I can't bring myself to doing it here. This is one where I do see the favorite being the right side here. I do think she has the better attributes of MMA, and I do think that she has the larger discrepancy in this matchup here to bring her towards a decision victory. And whether that be some success on the ground, whether that be with some strong physicality in her own right, all the stars align to point to someone like Barbosa this weekend. I think she does have the better attributes. I think that there are some red flags for her, not only the short notice replacement, but being finished a couple times, crumbling under pressure. Her chin is something that can be hit. But do I really think that Guerrero is someone who's going to come out here and exploit that deficiency? Not too much. And I actually think Guerrero is someone who with a ton of deficiencies in her own right. I mean, she was supposed to fight Laframboise, someone who I was going to be pretty high on from not only a Canadian standpoint, but also someone who I thought was a better mixed martial artist. But instead, you're getting someone here in Barbosa who has been fighting the way better level of competition, who is the bigger name here, and not only has a huge advantage in the ground, in my opinion, but is also competent enough with the technicality on the feet to keep up. And I don't think that Guerrero runs away with it in the striking. I actually think it might be Barbosa who have the edge there. And then you add in the ground advantage she does has, very explosive takedowns, very good top control. If she gets Guerrero down, I don't think Guerrero's getting back up. And she does look to improve positions. I think she is going to be the better grappler on the mat too. I think she's going to have the advantage wherever this fight plays out down there, and has the physicality and cardio to do it for all 15 minutes. Now, with all this being said, with all this love I'm throwing out there for Barbosa, do I want to parlay her at this price tag? Do I think that there is any really good, sharp way to target this fight? Not necessarily. I do think that Barbosa wins this fight a lot of the time. So if they open up point spreads or something like that, I could go out to target it that way. But really, unless I got a line with like a pretty good line for a submission rate, or one of these books opens up a good plus money spot that way, that's the way I look to target. And I know Dixon did talk about that there. I was looking at the sub line. It's down to plus 275 now. And I don't think that that's got much value or meat in the bone there. I'd play it up north of like 300, 400, something like that, just to get me excited. But truth be told, I think she has more paths to getting it done. And I think she is able to win the minutes en route to a dominant decision victory, but she does have more finish equity.
It's interesting, my man, because you were right. I was a little bit surprised to see the line. Not to say, again, I thought she was going to be favored here, like I mentioned, but a little bit surprised to see it so wide, just because, again, it's low-level WMMA. I do think there's some inherent variance in that regard. And I don't think that Guerrero's a complete zero in the wrestling and the grappling, right? She does attempt that a lot in her fights. She does seem like she rolls a little bit, but it just seems like there's a higher level on the other side. And so one thing I'll mention, I talk about this every week, but it feels like it bears repeating, where you're looking at Barbosa by sub right now on Bet Online. This is according to FightOdds.io, and this is a discrepancy that happens with some regularity, but her sub price is actually down to plus 250, Gordo, and you're looking at a ITD price at plus 285. So people will hammer one market so much that at times you'll actually get better value on the ITD, but in almost all cases, even if you're getting 10 cents worse, guys, I'm just telling you, why not pay up for that insurance? Why not pay the 10 cents there, 20 cents, whatever it is in difference? Because I'm telling you, when it's Jacqueline Amarim and she's never gotten the TKO before, and then she goes out there and breaks your heart, or she did it one time, I think she had gotten an actual knockout standing. But I don't think she'd ever gotten a ground and pound TKO. She always went for that sub finish. But when you see those opportunities, it's like you're going to, really be upset if you don't at least have coverage. I'm not saying take the sub prop, don't take the sub prop. I'm just saying if you're going to take the sub prop, you might want some coverage on that ITD, especially if you're getting a better price. So always check your books, get as many outs as possible at the best price. That's my long-term advice there. But I feel like we've covered this one pretty comprehensively. I will just mention, I bet when this opens up on U.S. domestic books, you're going to see Barbosa KO at 16-1, 20-1. Something like that, because it's 12-1 on Bet Online. And just for the same reason I mentioned about Amarim, and the same reason I mentioned every time somebody's got really good jiu-jitsu, somebody's got a really good ground game, if they're going to be on top in dominant positions and they're going against somebody tough, they might be able to just get that TKO for you and cash you a really big number. So at over 10-1, I think that's not something to ignore. The way I target these bets, I'd be more inclined to look at the ITD and that really wide KO prop. But I do think the sub is more likely. I just think it's a numbers game.
Now, if we are going out there and we are looking at these potential submission lines, and we're saying on the flip side, actually, I don't really know where you stand on this side of things, but if I don't think that Guerrero has much decision equity here or submission equity, and we think that her large path to victory is rooted on the short notice nature and the chin deficiencies, should we be potentially looking at an under at plus 250 or something like that? Or is there no value to you there?
I'm a contrarian, my brother. I always like to look at some controversial unders, but I haven't seen how this market's moved over time, so that would be something I'd want to check where it opened up at, for example. But I do think that this is a fight more often than not. Could see the scorecards, but when you have somebody who's got positional advantages, that lends itself to a finish. So it really just depends how much you see Rainn Guerrero competing here. If you think she's got heart, tough, grit, she's just going to fight it through to the end, then maybe, the under's not the play. But if you think she's got signs of quit in her, which is something I'd want to go back and look for, then that would be something interesting for me.
Yeah, to me, that's largely rooted in the fact. Sorry, I apologize.
No, go
Cutting
ahead.
you off there. that was largely rooted in the fact that when I'm looking at paths to victory for Guerrero, I don't see her winning a volume-based decision. I don't see her having much wrestling equity in her own right. Her path to victory, to me, is largely routed in uh, either, oh my God, Barbosa not showing up at all, or Barbosa's biggest deficiency being her chin and short notice nature. Stuff that I don't see happening at a high probability. But if I'm seeing the under 2.5 right here at plus 245 versus the inside the distance line at plus, what'd you say, plus 275 or something like that, might be
Plus
worth it just
285,
to
yeah.
plus 285, might be worth it just to cover my bases a bit more. Again, I don't know if I'm going to get there on this fight because it is not one where I'm necessarily too optimistic about it, but I do think Barbosa rolls. It's just the under covers our bases there.
Absolutely. And the one other thing to note, Vera points out she is on short notice. Sometimes when people are on short notice, they don't have as much gas tank. So they're going to, conserve a little bit of energy. If she's on top and she's got a good position, maybe she doesn't work for the finish as much. So that's how you could get burnt in a spot like this. But it also could go the other way. She could come out there with the mentality, I got 10 minutes in me. So I need to go out there and try and get this finish while I'm still fresh. So I'm intrigued by that under. I don't hate that spot because we have seen her finished as well. So you got a little bit of proof of concept there. And Rainn Guerrero, to be fair, we haven't seen her finished yet in professional MMA. So maybe you play into that variance and upside. Next up, we got Jean Silva taking on Kevin Vallejos. And Vallejos here, undefeated prospect out of Argentina, fought on the Samurai Fight House scene, kind of notorious for not being maybe the highest level, but he is a guy that looks like he's got a lot of physical skills, a lot of intangibles. He's got some power in his hands, clean knockouts with the left hook, with the right hand. He's getting some takedowns in his fights. Looks like he's competent enough with the grappling. But again, you got to remember the regional scene that he's doing this on. It's going to be interesting to see how that game translates up, on this Contender Series level. As for Jean Silva, I didn't find too much in terms of relevant tape. I'm going to do a little bit of deeper digging, see if there's stuff that I was missing. But I found a couple of his fights on YouTube. Seemed like he was fighting pretty low level competition, to be fair, 4-0 guys, negative record guys. And it looked like those guys didn't want to be in there with him. Looked like they were a little bit scared to engage at times. And he was landing a bunch of power shots, looking at the referee, like maybe we should stop this before the fight was already stopped. So it seemed to me like he just was fighting a pretty low level of competition as well. Neither one of these guys strikes me as ready for the UFC today, personally, but I do think that it should be a fun fight, a fun war. Two guys that look like they're going to be willing to go out there and trade on the feet in the early going. But I kind of feel like Vallejos has a little bit more due diligence here to probably look for the top position, try and force his wrestling game. I'm curious to see if it'll work because I don't have a great feel for this one. Gordo, how do you feel?
You didn't see that. No, I wasn't muted at all. No, this is a very, very fun matchup and one that I am actually looking forward to, and one where you come out away from both sides, lacking something. You feel like you're left wanting more. You feel like they can build in their skill sets. And with that being said, they're both very young fighters, so hopefully they can go out there and improve. But this is one where maybe you can capitalize on a fighter's flaw here. But to me, first things first, this Vallejo guy is a fun fighter, younger than me, which is saying something. I mean, not very often, but young guy, still a lot of way to go, undefeated, very low level competition, but he seems to have the goods, man. If he can put it together, he has great cardio, great power, great durability, good technicality on the feet as well, and some decent top control. Now, with that being said, there are a lot of other things you want to see from him. I mean, he lacks volume, in my opinion. He also can be caught in submissions. There are holes to his game, but really, his durability is in check to me. His offensive power and cardio is there as well. He's going to be a problem for all 15 minutes. Whereas you look at the other side of things, a guy here in Silva who I wanted to back against a young guy here in Vallejos, but I don't think I can, man. This guy, although a very fun fighter, he just isn't very sound. Let's put it that way. Like, he is very explosive, very dynamic, has a lot of power in his hands, but I can't trust him to go out there to fight to a good game plan. I can't go out there and trust him to win minutes because in his mind, all he cares about is that first round knockout, that first round finish. And against a guy who I just mentioned in Vallejos, who is super durable in my right, De Silva like he lacks the minute winning ability I want to see from somebody who is just so reliant on the finish. Now, can he get that finish? Of course. And not only can he get that finish by KO, I mentioned how Vallejos has some questionable submission defense. He puts his head deep in these takedowns, and I think that Silva could capitalize on that. So the finish ability is there for Silva very on. The problem I have with him is if he's not able to get that early finish, he kind of slows down the stretch. I think that Vallejos will take over. And not only is Vallejos the more technical striker in his own right, but he works the body well. Very good ability to go out there and pose a threat for Silva as the fight goes on. And I do think this line is about accurate. With that being said, do I want to lay juice on a guy in Vallejos who is facing a guy with as much power as Silva has, who a guy in Vallejos who put himself in questionable positions for Silva to take advantage of it? Probably not. And especially fighting out of a very good camp, in my opinion, the fighting nerds for Silva, he's not someone who I necessarily want to lay chalk against, although I do think there are holes in both these guys' games. So to me, it's a very, very interesting one. I think both these guys have their flaws. And to me, when I'm looking at them, I'm just seeing two very, very tough strikers who have a ton of durability and who will likely go out there and put on a fight of the night performance. When I'm seeing that, although it's going to be scary, and although I'm probably going to be clenched doing it, the over 1.5 set out the line it is something that's kind of gaining my attention. You know, Silva's a guy who wants to end it in the first round. I get that, but their durability is in check, man. And when you have two guys that are durable, such as Luca and McKee last week, sometimes you can get a decent line for it going over. And the let me just pull it up here. The over 1.5 was set at minus 140, minus 130, minus 130 over 1.5. Might have to get there just because the durability is so strong on both sides. But very dangerous fight, very volatile. Both fighters make mistakes. I think it's either Silva early or Vallejos taking over and finishing down the stretch, which I see being the most likely outcome.
I feel you on that, brother. Shout out to the sharpest chat in the game, coming in strong. A lot of takes on the Silva by guillotine prop here. Shout out to our guy Pierce, absolutely crushed the number, beat it by $6. You know, dropped from plus 1,100 down to plus 500 now on Bet Online, from what I could see. And it seems like, you know, he's also recommending Vallejos points at plus 375, kind of to your point, Gordo. You know, maybe a guy with really explosive finishes. I noted the power that he has in his hands, the knockout ability. He's got some submission equity as well. But to your point, durable opponent, young kid, never been finished before. We tend to see it's harder to knock those guys out, maybe a little bit easier to submit them. They're a little bit greener in the grappling. They're a little bit more susceptible to making those pivotal mistakes. And I did see him put his head in some guillotine situations, but he actually seemed to have pretty good awareness. I saw at one point he hit you know, what would almost be like a pretty advanced wrestling maneuver, which is like he had two legs together, kicked over, where he's basically upside down, posted on one foot. And that's to avoid the pressure of the guillotine on your neck. You kind of like walk your feet out, you know, turn the pressure off, and then come back towards it. And he did that in one of his recent fights. So I feel like he's got a decent feel for the grappling, the situations, the transitions. But it's not to say that it's going to translate at a higher level. So I do think the question marks on Vallejos is enough for me to say I would not lay the chalk in this kind of fight. I feel like both these guys prone to making mistakes, but the ABCs do say always bet on cardio. So if he was a minus 115, a minus 120, a minus 125, that would kind of feel like the appropriate line to me. But I don't feel compelled to bet on this fight. You know, the props, let's see how they open on U.S. domestics, because frankly, they're normally asleep at the wheel on a lot of submission props. So I'll wait and see here what the ends by sub is as well. I feel like both these guys could make a catastrophic error and get submitted. You got something,
Yeah.
Gordon?
Well, the more you think about it, it's like Silva to me is a guy who needs that finish, right? If he doesn't get that finish early, I don't think he wins enough minutes to live off his price tag. And for that reason, it's hard for me to go out there and trust him. He's more of a Ryan Spann, like, right? A guy's going to go out there, be a super big threat to win early on, but he's not going to win minutes on judges' scorecards all the time. Anthony Smith fight aside, we won't talk about the decision there. But to me, when you have a guy in Vallejos who's going to be the more technical striker, who has shown no deficiency in his chin or cardio in his own right, and although his faced low level of competition has done well accordingly, I do think that the durability on both sides of these things can carry it to the over. And if it does go over, it does correlate pretty well with that Vallejos by points, because I do think he's much better technically. I do think he's the better cardio. To me, it's dangerous with how dangerous Silva is early on, but I do think that the over may be a bit more, should be a bit higher. Let's say that.
The one other thing I'll mention here, age dynamics kind of difficult to project out, right? And one thing I like to keep in mind, I think there's a point of diminishing returns when you talk about age advantages. And when you got a 21-year-old against a 26-year-old, that's kind of like a toss-up to me in terms of the age dynamic, who it's going to favor. Because you could argue on the one hand, like 21 years old, durability is going to be there. All the data from Fightnomics, in fairness, did suggest that the younger fighter should be favored more often than not. However, when you think about just physical development, at 26 years old, you're basically done with your physical development. It's going to be a slow decline from here on out, But when you look at on the other side, Vallejo could still grow into his body. He could be a future lightweight. He could still be, developing that man strength. And you don't want to find that out, against somebody in the UFC's proving ground in the octagon. That could be a real bad news situation as well. So, we saw it with a Robbie Ring, in my opinion. Young kid comes in, looks good, everything like that. But when things start to go sideways, they can go sideways real quick. They could go south in a hurry. But this guy has a lot more experience than Vallejo, and he does look a little bit more physical just on the eye test. So interesting fight, my man. But I do think it's probably one that ends inside the distance. But to your point, it might go over. It just seems like these guys are going to spend themselves looking for victory. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like somebody by the end of this is going to have to say that they're done.
Big Bird brings up a good point there. Live bet entry might be the way to go, because if Silva's win equity is going to be early on, Vallejos might be able to take over.
Awesome. And yeah, after that round one spot, you can kind of evaluate, did he take too much damage? Does he look like he has the takedown defense? Why not get a little bit more information if you have access to live betting in a fight like this, where it seems like both guys, you don't really know exactly what to expect. So I think a little bit more information is better here. Next up, we've got a middleweight contest in the featured bout of the evening. It's Chad Hanekom from South Africa taking on Dylan Budka from Maryland, I believe, by way of the great state of Ohio. That touches my heart a little bit. He's out there in Findlay, Team Demolition. Never heard of him. Not trying to be disrespectful, but just hadn't heard of those guys personally. And when you look, though, he's got a, credible wrestling background. When you listen to Ron Kruk on the LFA broadcast, he said that he trained here, there, and everywhere at all these different places. I saw him listed on the athlete page at Urbana University, which is a D2 school. I believe he was at Notre Dame College. I think he kind of was all over the place a little bit. I think he might have done some time in the University of Wisconsin system as well. But in any case, the guy's for real in the wrestling department, no doubt about it. He's got good skills, but he also makes pivotal mistakes in his fights, Gordo. I'm going to kick this one over to you first. But I definitely saw some liabilities, let's say, in the game of Dylan Budka as a very young man on the come up here, who, again, talking about short notice for that first fight of the night, he's a short notice guy. We were supposed to see Hanekom take on a city kickboxing representative. Instead, it will be the short notice Dylan Budka here. How do you feel about this one, Gordo?
Well, let's address the two elephants in the room, right? Number one, this has the community split. It can be exemplified by Zach and Piezo in the comments right there. A lot of people like Hanekom, a lot of people like Budka. I don't blame you. There's a lot of things to like on both sides, a lot of things to dislike too. And let's address the second elephant in the room. Budka fought 7 days ago. I think it's 9 days ago now. And where did he fight at? He fought at heavyweight. And now he's going in here and fighting at middleweight. Okay, yes, he weighed in at 206 for heavyweight or 207. That's fine, but still, very short notice endeavor. Also a guy coming in after just fighting a week ago, cutting weight again, or I guess he didn't cut weight the first time, but making a lot of these changes, coming in a short notice against a guy in Hanekom. And although we want to go out there and discredit the South African fight scene, he's a guy who's coming from there and is a guy that kind of want to prop up, right? Cameron Simon, Driscoll Duplessis, that area they're looking to market here, and a guy in Hanekom here who, although maybe doesn't have the best overall skill set, has fought good level of competition, is the guy they originally wanted to have on Dana White Contender Series, and is the guy who is going to go out here and, in my eyes, should be the slight favorite. Now, I don't mind Dylan Budka. I like his work ethic. I like his ability to go out there, use offensive wrestling. I think he might even have a slight striking edge here, but the guy's still raw. I mean, he made his MMA debut like just a couple of years ago. A ton of amateur experience. I love that from him. A ton of experience just recently learning the game as well. But he still makes a ton of mistakes. And I think although he has some good fundamental tools himself, he's not in really the best opportunity to succeed here, because when he wins fights, he thrives on being the aggressor. He thrives on being the offensive wrestler, and he thrives on using that physicality to his advantage. And he's coming in here against a guy who wants to do that exact same thing back to him. A guy in Hanekom who's going to be the larger fighter, a guy who has been in a camp and who is going to have not only the size advantage, but the guy who was already slated to be on DWCS Contender Series, and a guy's going to go forward with a I'm not going to stop mentality till you're on the ground. And for that reason, I think you slightly have to favor Hanekom, and I do like him in that regard. I think that he's going to go out there, shoot a ton of takedowns, and he may not get the first 5, but he might land the 6th, he might land the 7th, and he is going to continue to try to wear on someone like Budka, who just fought 9 days ago. Now, is there a reason like Budka? Of course. I think he might have the slight technicality edge, although both these guys on the feet are very raw. They have their mistakes, but I don't know if it's easy to predict who's going to have the better work ethic, because that's what I think is really going to come down to here. I do like what I see from Hanekom, fighting the better level of competition, having that mentality to get people to the ground nonstop, and he's someone who I like to look there and back. Throw in the short notice mechanic, throw in the South African attraction. I think he's the side this weekend, and he's someone I'm looking at back here. However, I don't have nothing yet. And I see the comments there asking how good Budka's takedown defense is. He's good offensively, but he can be taken down by a gust of wind in a lot of these tapes. I mean, he was taken down, controlled by some fighters in the regional scene. And I think that although Hanekom isn't the best single shot wrestler, he's a guy who's going to wear you down by war of attrition, and it might get you the 5th and 6th shot. So it's interesting.
I found this one fascinating to look into because on the one hand, Dylan Budka is a man after my own heart, right? Ohio guy, getting the right work as a wrestler, and seems like he's really taken, a pretty hard road. His first fight against David Gladfelter was 2-0 as a professional, had some pro experience under his belt, and they went to war in that fight. You look at both guys at the end of that fight, they're both bleeding. Gladfelter, I think, was never the same. I think he went, on a 3-fight losing streak, and I think he might have even retired after that fight. I'd have to double check. But in any case, the guy was never the same. I feel like Budka came out better on the end of that. He did so much damage to the guy, but he kind of just gassed out there. You could see he was green, giving up some bad positions. And to your point, man, the takedown defense was the biggest liability that I saw. He's just a guy that he doesn't have a massive build for this division, right? He's 6 foot tall, and he's dealing with a 6'4" Hanekom here. And the thing about I got to bring up the guy's name again, Gladfelter, hard name, sorry. Gladfelter continuously, man, exploited him from that double underhooks position, Gordo. He continuously was just getting to double underhooks, and then he would muscle him right to the bottom side control position. He'd put him in really bad spots. And so a couple times he did a decent job trying to scramble, get up, but it seems like his jiu-jitsu game and his wrestling game is a lot more functional on offense than defense. That's typical of young fighters especially. But I do think that that's a big problem for him here. Hanekom just seems like a guy, talking about age dynamics, the age dynamics would point towards Budka here. He's the younger guy, right? He's a little bit fresher, let's say. But then you just look at Hanekom, and I think that, going to split decision with Ikram Alaskarov, it's a little bit deceptive, right? Because if you listen to the scorecards being read, it's 29-28 and then 30-27 times 2, right? But I think that he did win one round in that fight. I would have scored it at 29-28. Would we take Dylan Budka today to win a round off Ikram Alaskarov? And granted, that was Ikram at that time. So things change a little bit. Ikram in the UFC now is a more developed fighter. But bottom line being, this guy was going tooth and nail with a UFC level fighter, a couple years back. So his losses, they're fine. He's got a win over Leon Eliu, who was on the Contender Series previously. So I feel like this is a guy in Hanekom. I described him as ready to go right now. That's just how he feels. He's either a UFC level fighter today or he's just not. At 33 years of age, it's kind of just he's either ready to go or he's not. And I feel like he's probably ready to go. He's fought a high level of competition, 5-2 in Brave FC, which is a pretty decent level organization for sending people over to the UFC. And the guys that, we've seen Budka struggle against Bakoev and Gladfelter. I haven't actually watched the Bakoev fight, but just judging by the name, he probably out-wrestled him too, if I had to guess. And even if you watch the Wes Schultz fight, which is a fight that I was able to watch, Wes Schultz had a lot of good grappling situations there. He had a couple guillotine positions that looked very dire, and I think that Hanekom is not incompetent in the wrestling and the grappling here. So I feel like he could throw some low kicks. I feel like he could introduce some submission threats. I feel like he could potentially get some takedowns. And I feel like he's just got the size and physicality to potentially give Budka a lot of problems here, a little bit more experience as a pro. And to your point, he started so much longer ago that it just feels like he might be a little bit more ready and prepared today. Did you have anything else you wanted to add on this one, Gordo?
Yeah, there's a couple things too. I know Crystal asked me a question here as well. I think that the main thing we have to consider here is skill for skill at this point in time. I'm not saying that Hanekom is an absolute lock, right? I mean, the line is very close. We have ourselves a favorite in Budka right here as well. Budka, though, if we look at comparing this, if you want to take a shot on him at plus 180, I don't mind it. But I feel like to not have Hanekom as the larger favorite here is a bit disrespectful. We look at the Budka side of things. He just started a couple of years ago, and we asked the questions, is him fighting? Sorry, Crystal said here, agree that Budka didn't take much damage. His nervous system might be taxed from the last fight. Yeah, he's cutting another 26 pounds in 10 days that way. And not only that, but his extreme activity, he's not really giving his body much time to rest. He fought a five round event in LFA 2 months ago. Before that, he was fighting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in 2022. The guy out there, sorry, 2 cancels, about 7 times in 2022. He is putting his body under a lot of stress right now. And you're adding in the fact that you're not only going to be fighting a quick fight, but this fight's projected to go long. This fight's projected to require a ton of cardio, a ton of heart, a ton of willingness to continue. And if Hanekom's going to go out there and continue push a wrestling heavy pace for 15 minutes, it doesn't matter sometimes that short notice nature, that weight cut, that damage you took in that fight even 2 months ago might come back to cause problems to you. So yeah, skill for skill, I don't mind Budka. I think he has a decent physicality spot here, but he's facing a guy who wants to do the same thing to him. He's facing a guy who has much more experience and who's much more well rested and ready to go in his mindset. And I think Hanekom breaks the guy. But you know what? Shout out for Budka for having the activity. Shout out for him to taking this fight. And I think that if he wins this fight, it'll tell him a lot about who he is as a person, to someone who's going to fight through all this activity and look to be a decent prospect in the future. I just don't think his time is now. For those who got a good plus money number on him, shout out to you. But for me, I think like Hanekom's aside for now.
You know what, Gordo? That's so funny because I said, what I kind of was doing with my navigation document this week was doing a like a scan of somebody's tapology and then trying to come up with like a 1-sentence description of where I think they're at. And for Hanekom, I said Hanekom solid, ready out of the box, South African, because that's just what he seems like to me. As soon as he gets here, he's just going to be ready to go, kind of like a Chris Curtis, somebody like that, guy who's got a lot of relevant experience outside the UFC, and he's ready to either be a part of the UFC or not. And I think that on the other side, I said about Budka, high-level wrestling prospect, here too soon, ? It does seem like he can be a UFC-level fighter one day, but it just seems like he's a little bit green. He's a little bit, biting off maybe a little more than he could chew, just like he did with his first fight, just like he did with Bakoev, who had way more fights than him when he fought him. So I'm going to go back and watch that Bakoev fight. I always encourage people, check back in with me before the event, because sometimes upon further review, I'll change my mind. But for me, I got to lean towards the Hanekom side, bigger fighter, more experienced, and a little bit more seasoned at this point. But it should be a fun fight. Two guys
I don't want
to scrap.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell on it too much longer. I just will say, but Budka is a guy I want to see go out there in the UFC, get a couple more experience time in the gym under his belt, and I do think he could make it to the UFC. I just am puzzled by the stylistic matchup here.
Absolutely. Me as well, my man. And I will just say, odds makers were kind of feeling the same way I was, right? They opened the sub price plus 475. It's going the other way. Hanekom KO's taking some love. So I've seen proof of concept that this guy will give up his back, will put his neck in some compromised positions. I haven't seen evidence that he could just be easily knocked out, because he took some big shots in the fights that I watched and he seemed to take them okay. So for whatever that's worth, but Hanekom, the other thing I'll point out, the last thing I'll point out on this matchup, Hanekom does go for those leg strikes very often. And sometimes we see wrestlers can't adjust well to that. They like to be stepping forward with their lead leg, coming forward with power, with that kind of bounce in their step. And if you take that away from them, sometimes it can neutralize the wrestling. So for me, should be an interesting one. Budka, don't tap. He's hillbilly, Spike Carlisle. Love to hear it. But he did tap. He did tap to what's his name? I can't remember the gentleman's name. I've forgotten his name 3 times in a row. I'm sorry. He's a forgettable gentleman, but I wish him the very best.
David Gladfelter.
Yes, Gladfelter. I take it back, David. You did a great job of that fight. I'll never forget. All right. But next up, we've got Canada's own Serhiy Sidey.
Sure.
I'll leave that one to Gordo. Taking on Ramon Taveras. And this is another fight in the bantamweight division, this time on the men's side of things. Last time it was in the women's side of things. And you've got a Canadian prospect here who lost to Matteo Vogel, who we just saw on the Contender Series. That is his only career loss. He's training out of the Burlington Training Center with the likes of the Laramie brothers. So he's getting in work with guys who are, approximately UFC level guys. And he seems like a guy who's put in a lot of the right work. Still a young kid, 27 years of age. He's going to be the younger fighter in this matchup. He's going to have a little bit more professional experience under his belt here. And according to Tapology, everybody thinks he's going to get the job done. 86% of Tapology votes are on the Canadian. So my brother, let us know what you think is going to happen here, Gordo.
It's Canada time. No, this is a very fun matchup. I'm excited to see another BFL. I honestly, like, being from up north and stuff, I've never heard the BFL so much as I have in the past few weeks, man. I'll be honest, man. 3 champs going at it too. A former champion here. This is somebody who I think has an overall good skill set. I don't think he's perfect, but this Sidey guy, can't pronounce his name either, by the way, but he's a guy who I think has a good fundamental skill set. Very well-rounded, good capability to keep up on the ground, very good fundamental striking, a guy who has also the ability to mix it down on the ground and who has fought some pretty poor level of competition, but has disposed them accordingly. 7 finishes, has done well in that regard. Fights at a Burlington stand-up, Burlington and Niagara top team. He's a guy who I think at 27 years old has a decent skill set to go out there and rack some wins up in the UFC. Taveras on the flip side of things, the older fighter flying out of Florida, bulldog boxing guy. He's someone who I think has decent tools, and I think he has some success in his own right, but he lacks that same, let's say, Swiss Army knife of moves here. He's a guy who's also fought poor level of competition. I think that although he has some decent offensive wrestling and some really good counter boxing, he's limited to that. I think when it comes to comparing these guys from a macros perspective, although I think Ramon Taveras is going to be the better boxer of the two, Sidey is going to have the better Muay Thai, more ability to use his kicks from the outside range as well. I think he has the ability to mix it up there as well. And although I'm going to give Taveras the edge in the striking, that is a much smaller discrepancy than I give on the mat for Sidey. I think Sidey has a huge advantage on the mat. I think he's the ability to take him down, dominate him there. I think he's got a good entry on his takedowns. I think he transitions to top position as well. And not only is he going to have that advantage on the ground, but he's someone who I think has the work rate and the ability to fight for all 15 minutes. Now, I don't think Taveras is bad. I think he has a good overall skill set, and he has the opportunity to win this fight. I just think his path is limited to catching something with him on the feet, which is not impossible because he does have some good hand speed, but the better overall fighter with more paths to victory, with better cardio, in my opinion, better, let's say, mixed arsenal or mixed bag of weapons is going to be Sidey here, and I am taking him to get the win here. I think he utilizes his grappling and his tools from the outside to dominate in this fight, and I do think he looks good doing so. Get another BFL fighter in there.
Shout out. And Kyle Machado was able to break through. This is a BFL champion on the Sidey side here. And he's also a guy that, I did get a chance to watch his fights. He was able to go 5 rounds, pushing a very hard pace against Austin Russell. Austin Russell, tough as could be, man. He took an absolute shit kicking in that fight, especially down the stretch. He was very competitive early. Sidey actually lost the first round, in my opinion. But then he won every round after that and really dominated, used his grappling, made adjustments, seemed like a very smart fighter. And on top of that, the things that concern me about him, he's fighting the same guys over and over again, multiple rematches. The Canadian scene, brother.
No, it's not
we say
good.
with love and respect. It could be better, right? It could be better. But we also use these same kind of lines of argument to poke holes in Caio Machado. But it's like you can only fight who you fight. You can only fight the guys that can line up against you. And Sidey went out there against the toughest guys in this regional scene, the guys that can present problems like Vogel, and he got that experience. He got that cage time. He's been in there for 5-round fights. He's done the level of preparation. So he does seem like a guy who's really going to go out there and put on a sound performance here. And hard weight cut on the other side. That's something I'm looking at too. Taveras struggled on the weigh-in, had to come back and do it again, and so, he barely beat the scales here, and he's got an opponent still in front of him. And that's going to be a big thing to overcome in my view. So, our guy Pierce, Sharp Individual, says he played the goes the distance at plus 195. Surprised how much books are favoring the ITD, and that seemed to pique something in Gordo's mind. So go ahead, please, brother.
I was just going to say, I think that CD by decision at plus 300 was something I was looking at as well. Considering the let's say, large advantage on the mat he does have, I think he's able to take down Ribeiro. I think he's able to control him for all 15 minutes to be able to do so. Also, let's say the main concern with that is that also that weight cut it may add some more reasons for me to like him here, but it also makes it more dangerous for me to go out there and get a finish. I found it interesting that although Romero's a super built guy, he's gonna be Taveras is gonna be the more built guy, smaller fighter who had a tougher weight cut, right? So he's coming in smaller stature. I think he's gonna be able to keep him at the end of his range as well, all while having that cardio advantage that comes with not only a better weight cut, but just the better style in general. So all signs are pointing me to CD here. I like the decision line. I like the fight goes to the distance line. Plus 300 for CD by decision using that grappling path to victory is definitely live.
I totally agree with you, but the one thing I will say, I'm not going to discredit CD's ability to finish this fight as well. You're looking at the market, say that his ability to win this fight by knockout is tremendous, right? And I think that that's in part because his opponent struggled with the weigh-in. He pushes a hellacious pace, and we've seen him do that for 5 rounds, right? So imagine he condenses that volume into a 3-round affair. We could see him push a really high pace, and he's done it in the grappling, and he's done it as well with his striking. So I feel like he can push a really high pace. And if he had an opponent in front of him in Taveras who was going to try and grapple him back, then I would be more concerned. But Taveras strikes me as a guy who's going to be, kill or be killed, striking on the feet more often than not. He does have some wins by submission, but he's fought at a pretty low level. I would say he has a loss via knockout in the very first round to Edward Massey. I wasn't able to find the full fight, but I was able to find a highlight video of that. And again, guys, that's a 500 fighter, to this day. I think he's one fight above 500. So it's not like this guy has the greatest resume on paper. And he seems like a tough guy. He seems like a guy who's going to try and bring that heart and spirit, but I question his durability a little bit, and I question his grappling when challenged here by somebody like Sidey, who's a little bit more well-schooled, who trains with a bunch of guys who are credited on the mat like the Laramies. And I know they're not the biggest guys, but they are very skilled and very talented. So I think he gets a lot of the right work in. And I think Sidey by sub is another one that opened up at plus 475. It's moving in the opposite direction. People don't agree with it, but I just feel like this guy Sidey, his ground and pound, his striking, it's not that powerful. It's not that precise. So a lot of times he's landing so many shots. He's going off. He's looking for the finish. And a lot of times that leads to him searching for the neck, searching for these chokes, searching for short front headlocks. And would I be that surprised if he was able to pull that off here? No, I would not. So I think that Sidey rounds 2 and 3, interesting look, because for me, it's a cardio dynamic as well. I just think that this guy's going to be able to push pretty hard down the stretch here and really test his opponent who struggled with the weight. And guys, when you struggle with the weight, sometimes it makes it so much harder to dig deep later on in a fight. And I just think that could be borne out here. So I wish you guys the best of luck, my brethren on the decision bets here. But if the domestics are caught with their pants down with a really wide sub number, I wouldn't be too surprised if I found my way there. But I'll do a little bit more tape, a little bit more due diligence here. But I'm leaning towards the Sidey side as well, my brother. So Canada, stand up. Can y'all get one onto the damn show? Machado is a freaking Brazilian. Let's get a Canadian onto this UFC roster with a chance, right?
Hey, we were close last week. We'll see. I music to my ears. You liking CD here though?
Absolutely. Let's get one. Canada. Nothing like my guy Chad and Hellinger plus 300, but we'll see what we can do. Next up, my man, we got the main event of the evening. So what I'm going to request from each and every one of you guys, the sharpest chat in the game, go ahead and drop a like on this video. Go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you hit the bell for notifications. I'll tell you what, guys, I'm going live again. If you guys haven't had enough fight talk, if you guys are saying to yourself, yo, the Contender series isn't enough, F that, Liam, I want to talk UFC 293. Well, then you go back, you roll something up for yourself, you brew that coffee, because we're going live again to talk UFC 293 after the fact. So make sure you subscribe, drop a comment below with whatever you're rocking with on Contender series. And without further ado, we're going to the main event of the evening, guys. So let's talk about it. We've got the undefeated Bruno Lopes. We've got two guys here undefeated at 11-0. Bruno Lopes makes two of them. And now we've got Brendson Ribeiro on the other side here. And Brendson Ribeiro could fit the mold of a guy who's brought in here to lose, or he could fit the mold of a guy who's brought in here like, we saw with what's his name from last week. Starts with a P. Cool name, got the win with an insane knockout. You remember who I'm talking about, Gordo?
Carlos Prates.
Yes, Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates went out there. He had a bunch of losses on his record, but he was better than the record showed, right? And when we did the tape, when we did our due diligence, that's what we came away with too. We were like, this guy's a killer. This guy is menacing. And on the other side here, we've got a guy who's got some losses, right? Ribeiro, he seems like his chin, his durability is his biggest concern. This is a light heavyweight fight, 205 pounds. We know that could definitely play a factor, right? How durable you are. Johnny Walker, dangerous guy, good offense, potent, scary. Sometimes he gets poked on the chin one time. He starts doing the dance. He starts wobbling, right? Those are the kind of things that can hold you back in a division where durability can take you so far. Yuri Prochazka, how many fights has he won where he's been knocked out? Multiple in the UFC. He gets knocked out and he still wins the fight, right? These are rare, anomalous type of guys, and that's what makes them, championship level. They have intangibles. A guy like Bruno Lopes, we don't have any way that we've seen him beat, right? But you got to try and poke holes in the resume when a guy's 11-0. You got to try and find, is there something that people are missing about this guy? And I do think his wrestling and grappling is just okay. That would be my takeaway, where if you're trying to poke holes in his resume, he seems effective with his striking. He seems a little bit, meat and potatoes, but very effective, powerful, walks people down, has a good process, likes to come forward. But I also felt like his wrestling and grappling, it was just all right. I felt like I wanted to see a little bit more. His transitions were fine. He seems aggressive with his submission hunting. I like to see that. But there was a couple times his takedown attempts just looked a little bit, one note to me, a little bit lethargic, and kind of against the higher level competition he fought, I felt like he struggled to get those takedowns off a little bit. So I'm curious what your thoughts were on this main event, Gordo. I told you before we started recording, I was a little bit surprised by the line. I hadn't checked the lines before we got started, and it just seems like an unusually wide line for a Contender Series fight. And Lopes, to me, didn't seem like a ball of charisma that's setting the world on fire, and like the UFC would be dying if they don't have him. Seems like a good fighter, but he didn't strike me as like, he blowing my hair back minus 700 favorite, to tell you the God's honest truth. How do you feel?
Well, a lot of it's rooted into what we said when we looked at the fight card last week. Do you remember what we said when we saw this this fight lined up?
Nope.
We said, oh yeah, Lopes is going to smoke him, right? Just Tapology looking at this one. We said Lopes is going to smoke him just because you look at the way this guy's undefeated, propped up for success against a guy who's been knocked out, finishing all these matchups. But just by wiki capping it, you're able to see, yeah, there's a guy who should be favored here. And I agree that the right guy should be favored, but I'm with you in the point that we should be a bit hesitant, right? I think Lopes is the rightful favorite. I think he has the better skills, way more technical, but there are his red flags, right? I think he can be hitting his own right. I think he slows down after a bit as well. And I think that if you can't get the guy out of there, there's going to be problems. The problem is in front of him is a guy who is just, let's say, really poor defensively, a guy who can be hit. And when he's hit, is just not the most durable, a guy who can be folded, a guy who can be put down. But what he does like to do in return is try to knock people's heads off. The problem I have with this fighter here, especially when you're looking at a huge underdog, is when you have a guy in Ribeiro who I think has fight-ending intentions, but his durability isn't there. Does his technicality back up that lack of durability, or is he going out there and throwing haymakers? And well, unfortunately, he's going out there and throwing haymakers, like big looping shots. If they land, they're going to do damage. But the more you're swinging, the more chance you have to get countered, and the more chance you have to be hit and cracked in that durability side of things. Which is why I completely agree with where the line is. I also think that that's why I agree that there is a favorite in this matchup who is larger here. I think the line's here and there. Lopes, though, not only has the advantage in the technical striking, the power, the durability, the level of competition, but also the ground game. I think if he wants to go there, take him down, I think he has the opportunity to pass, and I think he'll be really aggressive to get that finish early on. But the question comes, if he does it, what happens when Ribeiro lands something? If he does, there are a lot of questions that are yet to be answered, and I don't think Lopes is the type of guy to want to be favored this heavy against anyone. But truth be told is he has a ton of power. He's going to be the more technical striker, and he has more paths to going to get done against a guy who's been finishing a lot of his losses and finished bad. So to me, from a technicality standpoint, the rightful favorite is the rightful fighter is favored. You have a guy in Lopes who is the rightful favorite here. However, I'd be more so inclined to bet the props here. I know the under is juice, but I don't see this fight going very long. Both these guys are very explosive, poor cardio, and questionable durability. So give me the under. I think Lopes gets him out of here in round one. Not a hot take, very popular opinion, but hey, if you're on the underdog here, man, you're getting some good lines. I think he might have a potential cardio edge here with that dump from Lopes. And I mean, if you're going out there and looking to get cute with it all, like Ribeiro by KO plus 800, Ribeiro round 2 plus 1400. There's some decent ways to back the dog, but that's not going to be my cup of tea this week.
Oh boy. I'm not going to call you square, Pierce, but I will say, I mean, at what price, my brother? At what price? Because I think that this line is a little bit fucking insane, to tell you the truth. Not on the money line necessarily, but listen to this, Gordo. We're talking about a fight in the light heavyweight division where there's a plus 700 ITD. I mean, if somebody could square that circle for me, I'd be a little bit curious, because I'll tell you the truth. Like, when I watch a guy like Lopes, does he look pretty good? Yeah, sure. He looks fine. Does he look like a guy who's never getting hit? Like, who's like, the Serhiy Gane of the heavyweight division? He's going to have the biggest strike differential you've ever seen. He could knock this guy out with one punch. I think that that's definitely true. He's got some natural power, but I feel like he doesn't look that comfortable when he's fighting. His last fight, it went to the second round against Paiva, and probably a little bit of a formality there. Minus 265. So you beat the number there pretty considerably by like $1. So I think that that's fair for sure. Smash the like, says Mushroom. Appreciate you there, my brother. And I agree with those sentiments. But to your point, somebody in the comments, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, Crystal says Lopes had a 6-year layoff, and his wins after 2021 aren't as impressive in my view. I completely agree. I watched those LFA fights. Seemed like tailor-made matchups. Seemed like custom, cupcake type matchups. What's that?
This does too, though.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but in those fights, like, he was cleaning them up accordingly, I suppose. But you've got a guy from Evolu South Thai. That's a real camp. Like there's real UFC pros training at that camp. You look on excuse me, let me double check my notes here. We've got, he is a BJJ brown belt under Thiago Miranda Lopes, and that was a recent development. So he was just a BJJ purple belt for most of the fights that we've seen from the guy. And maybe that's what explains the fact that I didn't think he was that great on the ground. You look back, Ribeiro does have a win over Antonio Arroyo, who did make it to the UFC. That was early on in his career. So he wasn't ducking, hard fights early on in his run. Seems like he kind of got put on a little bit of a track to get some easier fights, some easier wins under his belt. But you look at his submission losses, they occurred way back in the day. I think it was 2016, both of them, back-to-back fights. And one of those submission losses was against Marcio Alexandre, who was a UFC washout. And that was literally his first fight after he got out of the UFC. So right from the UFC to fighting this guy. So maybe this guy is literally just like the B-side in Brazil that they bring in to lose fights. Maybe that's how it is. But it didn't seem that way to me in his last fight, because he went out there against Fagundes, who is a PFL fighter, and that guy was favored to win, went out there, was whooping his ass. And the guy was in a bunch of bad spots, right? If he wanted to quit, he could have quit for sure. He was underneath. He's in bad positions. Looks like the guy's going to TKO him at one point. And he kept getting sweeps. He kept rolling through positions, and he ended up finding the finish. Like, he just seems like a guy who invites chaos. And he's also got a couple submission wins on his resume, including against Serhiy back in the day. So the guy is not a complete fish on the mat. So I feel like he's going to go for a lot of attacks here. He's going to try and create chaos, and he might make Lopes uncomfortable. Lopes saw his own blood in a few of these fights. So I don't know, man. I think Lopes can and should win, but I think the idea of, laying minus 700 on a Contender Series fighter like this, who's had big gaps in his career, who hasn't really beaten that, relevant fighter in the last 10 years. He beat RoboCop. That's a great win. It was 10 years ago, basically. It's like, so I almost throw that one out from the sample. RoboCop is a completely different fighter today. What would they line it right now? I don't think Lopes would be a competitive line. So it should be fascinating, though. He could definitely be a UFC level guy. I kind of like your take on the under too, because I'll tell you what, when you look at a kill or be killed fighter, Brendson Ribeiro is a kill or be killed fighter. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kills, but I wouldn't be surprised if he dies. And if he dies, he dies. So I'll be looking towards that under as well. And I would almost prefer that to the ITD personally, Pierce. But I do wish you the best of luck, my brother. I think Lopes can finish, but bro, plus 700, bro, plus 700.
Yeah, and I think the final thing you got to say on this one is we're out here and we're talking value. We're here to break down the fight. We're talking numbers. If this fight was minus 110, there's no doubt who'd we be on. It's Lopes, and well, for me at least, I would hammer Lopes if that was a line. It's not. We have a huge indication on a guy who had a huge layoff, who is fighting a low level of competition. Although to me, he still has a tailor-made matchup. He's not someone who you want to go out there and parlay at a high clip, in my opinion. But in my eyes, skill for skill, there's no doubt about who's the better technical fighter. There's no doubt about how this fight should go, and that is Lopes getting a very early finish. We're just trying to question the line here and give you guys more in-depth breakdowns.
Now, imagine this is a flyweight fight. Okay, fair enough. I mean, yeah, then there's probably a lot less room for volatility. This is light heavyweight, dude. The guy makes a wrong turn. He comes in when the guy's throwing a punch. It's all over. We're talking about, oh my, can you believe that? Light heavyweight, there's just less room for mistakes. There's less room for error. And on top of that, this guy's going to probably go out there and attempt takedowns against a guy who most of his wins by submission or by guillotine. So he spams the guillotine like to a fault, right? And that could get him finished here. That's why I like that under. But again, if this guy goes out there, panics, he's out there in front of Dana White. He's had, 2-3 fights in the last couple of years. He's like, oh, shit, why am I still out here? I'm 30. What the he's going against a guy who's younger than him as well. So I don't know, man. It just seems like a very volatile fight to me at light heavyweight. And that's why minus 300, no problem. Minus 7, minus 650. It just seems like it's running away. It reminds me of Genaro Valdez, right? Maybe he wins, but you're going to be probably like, oh, like, yeah, he's against, and dude, that's against Alaska FC. This is against an Evolution Thai fighter, So I don't want to rule out, either one of these guys winning, but I'm definitely leaning towards the under here. And you know what I thought was funny, Gordo, and I'll share this with the viewers as well. Both fighters have a win via sub in round 2 against Flavio Magon. He is just a classic Brazilian journeyman, 21-17, lost the same exact way to both guys. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, no, it is an interesting one here, and I like what Gerardo posted there with the parlay. That might be a way I potentially go as well. The fear in that one is the short notice WMMA chalky favorite as well. I do think she wins. I got to see if I got the balls to parlay someone like that. So, but no, I do like that parlay, and I do think the under in this one is definitely a way to go. I laid a couple of units on a juiced under 1.5 last week with Peterson and Cole. Might have to do the same here.
And that was the sound play last time. So good stuff. Next up, the recap, my brother. That's where we're at. We've finished the 5 fights. So why don't you let people know, a quick synopsis of your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, well, as always, we're going to go over every single fight quickly, break it down. Very first fight of the night, Barbosa, Guerrero. Short notice for Barbosa, and that's really the only red flag I have on this one because I do think she's about the better level of competition, better ground game, better technical striker, and I do think Barbosa wins this fight at a high clip. Number, questionable, potential parlay piece if you're feeling risky with it. I might look for big plus money on the under. I do think Barbosa is the much better technical fighter here with submission upside, whereas Guerrero's path to victory is lined in the short notice nature and questionable durability of Barbosa. Silva Vallejos, super fun fight. I can't trust Silva with his fight IQ and his non-minute winning style, but man, he's very dangerous. He has round 1 finish potential. If it goes outside of round 1, I think Vallejos takes over. I think Vallejos is much more technical, better cardio, good ability to use his grappling and win minutes that way. And for that reason, I'll look at the over 1.5. I'll look at a live entry for Vallejos. Look at Vallejos by decision, but very, very dangerous matchup considering all the round 1 equity Silva has. I think it's Silva early, Vallejos late. Fun fight. Hanekom, Budka, Twitter battle of the week. I can't trust someone coming in who just started MMA a couple of years ago on short notice after just fighting at heavyweight 9 days ago, cutting all that weight. I think Hanekom continues to take him down. I think he puts a pressure on him, uses his physicality. Hanekom's got all the immeasurables advantage from a popular South African market. I think he's a guy who should be favored a bit more. And I don't mind the shots on Budka considering he's a guy who projects well as the fight goes on. But young guy, poor stylistic matchup. Give me Hanekom there. I like Sidey, Canadian bias potentially, but I think he has some covered everywhere here. I think he's got the grappling upside. I think he has the more well-rounded nature. And I do think he has minute winning potential here. Taveras, who although Taveras has power, doesn't have the same Swiss Army knife of tools that Sidey does. I think Sidey takes over as the fight goes on and wins this fight pretty convincingly. And then Lopes, Ribeiro, I'm more so on the under because I do think Lopes steamroll him in the first round considering the poor durability and technicality of Ribeiro. But if Lopes is a fraud, he can be finished in his own right. Under's maybe a way to go on that one. Should be a fun one. I just realized because Hanekom's now a favorite. I just picked all favorites. That's boring. But sometimes you don't got to force any action. Make sure to check out my Twitter.
Bovada's got Hanekom plus 105, brother. You're squared away. Just like what's her name last week? She was like plus 105, plus 110. Only dog that came through on the whole UFC card. That lady. I'm drawing a blank on her name right now. Yeah, of course. Cornoli. Cornholio.
Yep. Yeah. So that's maybe the way to go. Make sure to check out my plays at Gambles Gordo on Twitter. I'll be posting them there before the fight goes on. I'll get some plus money in there for sure. I promise. But excited to hear your concise breakdowns here. What do you got?
Absolutely, brother. So let's rattle these off. I'm going to go with Dione Barbosa. Very hesitantly, right? She is coming in here on short notice, and I want to respect that stat that the short notice fighters are really struggling. But just looking at Rainn Guerrero, she seemed very green to me. She seemed like she hadn't fought a very high level of competition, and she's fighting a girl here who has fought, in my view, the higher level of competition and who does have a clear path to victory on the mat. So give me Barbosa in that first fight of the night. You know that we like to stop Brazilian hate on this show as much as possible, and we're going to have to try and do it in the first fight of the night. But in terms of starting the Brazilian hate, let's start with Kevin Vallejos here, who just seems to me like a slightly more athletic prospect, coming in here. Argentina against Brazil, tough spot in a certain regard because the grappling pedigree in Brazil is just higher level on average than in Argentina. But I do think that Vallejos a little bit more potent with his striking, a little bit more durable, a little bit younger, probably just going to check a couple more boxes here, probably a little bit more marketable as well. So give me Vallejos in that fight. Next up, we've got Budka, man after my own heart from Ohio. However, fighting out of Ohio. However, he's going to be in a little bit over his head here, in my view. He's trying to catch up on experience quickly, but he's got a guy in Hanekom who's very big, who's been around for a long time, who's fought a high level of guys, and who seems like he's ready to go right now at the UFC level. So give me Hanekom in the third fight of the night. As far as the Sidey and Taveras fight, I'm also going to go with Sidey here. I think that Sidey probably gets the job done inside the distance. That would be where me and Gordo slightly differ there. We've seen Taveras put away by a 500 fighter via knockout in the first round. Sidey's not that really, powerful guy. He might even struggle in the first round here, but I think that as the fight goes on, he imposes his will and his skill set on people. He makes good adjustments over the course of the fight, and I think he's going to go out there and push a hellacious pace and potentially finish in the second or the third round here. So give me Sidey to finally get a Canadian onto this UFC roster. And as far as the main event goes, I'm also looking at that under, but frankly, guys, I feel like it's a dog or pass situation. I can't endorse laying -6xx on pretty unproven light heavyweight prospects. Yes, he's 11-0. Yes, he's got some shiny wins on the resume, but you start peeling through the information and you go, wow, big gap in the resume. Just like an employer, right? Employers would be like, hey, man, you haven't worked in quite some time. What were you doing? I was robbing banks and doing that for this amount of time. And, I don't want you to ask about that, right? In this case, like, what was this guy doing? He might have just been working a regular job. He could have just been going back to whatever, normal life is. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that we're trying to figure out who's going to be ready to go right now at this UFC level. And this other guy, yeah, he's been taking some L's, but you know what? How you take L's? By fighting. And he's been fighting more often. And so he's put himself at more risk. He's fought a bunch of guys that have winning records over this time. Yeah, you're going to drop some of those. He's fought some names you've heard of. You're going to drop some of those. But he's got wins over UFC level fighters like Antonio Arroyo early in his career. And he does seem to me like a guy who the UFC loves these kind of guys. Kill or be killed. Go out there and put it all on the line. Doesn't matter if you're going to win every fight, as long as you're going to go out there and throw down with everybody. This guy, when he gets hurt, he does not stop throwing. He will continue to fight from his back. He will look for submissions and sweeps. And there are times when he's faced adversity and hasn't just quit. So if his chin gives out, if he dies, he dies, right? That's why I lean towards that under. But I'm just saying, very wide dog price. And how many times have we seen that Brazilian underdog in the main event? I'm just saying, guys, we've seen it a few times. Our guy, Almeida, I was saying it then too. He's a kickboxer, right? He has that different background. But I'm just looking at this and saying to myself, man, wouldn't they love, we were talking about all favorites we picked, right? Wouldn't they love if in a very volatile light heavyweight fight, they lost every parlay with the big bang, and that would be not that surprising to me. So I think Brendson Ribeiro could definitely win this fight, and I'm not going to sleep on his chance to do so. That's my synopsis, brother. Did you have a Degen parlay for our guy Mushroom?
Oh, I got a Degen parlay, and I can't bet it yet because they can't parlay the props yet. But when I do, this is going to be a juicy one. All right, let's just pull up the odds and make sure they're good here. I'm giving some good odds here for Mushroom. First leg, we are going to take Kevin Vallejos by decision over super tough Gene Silva, which is plus 325. Then we're going to take, these are contrarian plays, by the way, big plus money, not saying they're locks. Degen is the key word of this Degen parlay. Vallejos decision. Then we're going to add the under in the Barbosa Guerrero fight at plus 240. And then to round it off, this is where me and this is, let's say, a way to target the main event and get some juice. Then we'll add Lopes round 1 plus 145. 3+ money plays should pay out decent.
I absolutely love it, brother. And I'm going to really quickly run a test here for what the best odds you can get on this prop is, because I don't want to speak out of turn here, folks. So bear with me 1 second because I just about have it. All right, wonderful. So I've got what I'll call the 2-tier of parlays right here. If you were to go with the more conservative lay, in my opinion, it's a plus 500. So I'm not giving you nothing, right? I'm giving you some plus money here. Plus 500, the under 1.5 rounds. Sidey on the money line, Vallejos on the money line, Hanekom on the money line. That pays out plus 500, right? But if you want to get more ballsy, you take that main event underdog plus 450. You take Sidey, Vallejos, and Hanekom. That's gonna pay 21-1. That's what I would be rolling with if you really want to go Degen, because personally, I think he is a live underdog at over 4-1. I think that's a little bit too wide. There you have it, guys. So we've gone through everything, the synopsis, the Contender Series parlays. Here's what we haven't gone over, and we need to go over just one last time. Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Why am I referencing it? Because we're going to be there next week at this very same time. So not the same time and same bad channel, but the same time on the Plays and Fades channel. And you guys can find that information in the description box below. And you can also find great information from our guy Gordo at that very same link each and every week. So Gordo, please let the people know all the great work that you're doing and exactly where they can find you, my man.
Hey, I appreciate the shout. As you mentioned, we will be there next week as well. I'm pulling up the card. Let's see what kind of card we have on hand for next week Contender Series. Like you said, that is going to be Plays and Fades YouTube channel, week 6. All the even numbers will be on mine. Next week, we have ourselves a Peruvian fighter in the main event. And then I count 1, 2, 3, 4 Brazilians, some undefeated names there, some pretty interesting matchups, and I'm excited to dive into that one. As for this week, we got a big pay-per-view, so make sure you're subscribed to their Plays Video YouTube channel. DFS content is the main thing, but also cover the betting stuff as well. Be sure to check that out. We're hitting almost at 1,000. Wouldn't mind hitting there. I think we're at about 30 away from that, so hopefully we'll get there soon. And then my Plays for DWCS Contender Series will be posted tomorrow afternoon at Gambles Gordo on Twitter. Be sure to check that out. Show some love to Liam as well, and I appreciate it, guys. Best of luck.
Guys, there's 60 people rocking with us live, so make sure at least 30 of you guys, but hopefully all 60 of you guys, go over there and subscribe to that Plays and Fades YouTube channel right away and turn on that notification bell, guys, so that way you do not miss when we get started for next week's Contender Series breakdown. But hopefully you guys have been doing well, cashing in. I did put out on Twitter earlier, guys, a recap of my best bets. Some of which we've talked about in detail on the show, but other of which, I've given away in terms of my information that, people access each and every week. And I've been very proud of how the reads have gone this year. We did so good when we first started on Contender Series. Last year was a little bit down. And this year, I feel like we're back to a well-oiled machine, really riding the waves and feeling good about our reads on Contender Series this year. So if you guys have enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And I'm late to my other video already. So guys, I'm going to push that to about 1 o'clock, 1:05, 1:10. You guys know me, but I will be here and we will be talking about UFC 293 at first look. So if you guys are looking for more fight talk, keep it locked, keep it loaded, get that coffee brewing because we're coming right back to do it all again. So God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. Until next time, take care and we'll see you.